Well, we might as well hit it. You guys have asked. Again, we delivered. You guys can thank Francis and Constantine and the amazing guys over at Trigonometry for this one. Welcome to the show, Mike Baker. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I'm honored to be here.
That's a shock.
I know. Well, it is a shock. It's a shock to me too. Not only did I not mean it, but no, I am kidding. I'm very happy to be here.
Wow, as one in the CIA always does, they never stop, do they? They just nope, they just spit out the truth just like that. Well, we might as well start off with that. Since you're not really that honored to be here, we can lean in. Hey, Mike, why the CIA?
No, well, I think we've gotten off to a really good start.
It's great.
Yeah. Why the CIA?
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
yeah, uh, that's a good question. I hadn't gone searching for them. I hadn't intended to or hadn't planned on it necessarily. But circumstances, a series of events um, led to an introduction, and then as they're wont to do, as they tend to do, a lot of interviews, a lot of discussions. There's a whole process involved, even back then, and yeah, probably even more so back then. And so ended up, being recruited and into the operations group, and I had a great time. I'm not one of those people that didn't get enough hugs. Every now and then you get someone coming out of an organization and they bitch and moan about it, or they complain, or they think if only I'd been listened to, we wouldn't have had this disaster or something. And that's bullshit. I had a great time, met some wonderful people, still know some fantastic people there. So I think it's always good. That's sort of my caveat is, if people think, you know, I'm not a shill for the agency, but I had a great time. And so that colors my perspective because I saw some amazing things and some people do some incredible things. Never for a pat on the back, and certainly not for the money. So yeah, it was a good ride. It was a really good ride.
I love that you say it's a good ride because a lot of my other friends that are ex-CIA, I don't know that you ever get out, Mike.
Oh, sure you do. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anybody who kind of winks and says, "Oh, of course you." Now, once it's like any other thing. Once you decide to step out for whatever your reason, then yeah, it's not a you don't have these two-way conversations. I never call them up and ask them for inside information or any details, even though I run an intelligence and security services firm.
Right.
It's not like I would ever call them up and think that they're going to tell me something secret. You don't put them on the spot like that, right? You sign a paper that says you keep your yap shut until you
Mm,
die, and you also understand that you don't get the you don't get to dip back in, right? It's a little bit
mm.
different. It's not like a law enforcement's a little bit different, right? Law enforcement sort of the old boy network, and maybe you were with the bureau, the Secret Service, or NYPD, whatever it is. There tends to be more of an ability to go back as an old boy network and have two-way dialogue, that sort of thing. But that's not how the agency works or should work.
Well, this is true. Unfortunately, I do notice that there are or have been a series of events that have happened over the past, I don't know, couple of years, 3, 4 years. When was 21? 3 years ago, 3 years ago, where it seems like individuals that were ex-CIA seem to dip a toe back into areas of the countries that we were involved in for 20 years and start doing some dicey things. And I can say those people that are willing to cross lines, I do appreciate in that time and place. That being said, I know that not everybody does have that relationship, but it's been really fascinating to find out about you kind of as I would assume, and I'm sure you're not, I'm sure you're used to this being said. Most people, I believe, found out about you through Joe and through that show and through those platforms and really saw a very different side of what it means to be an operator, transition out, and then take it into a completely different area of expertise.
Mm.
I just never thought I would see somebody who had such in-depth experience over such a very important time in history switch to TV, Mike.
Mm. Well, neither did I. So That
Okay.
was, yeah, that was a new one on me too. But what I tell you, the what happened was a couple of events.
Okay.
I'm gonna bore people with all these
No, I
background.
want to give it all.
All right, I'm just gonna throw it all out there.
All of it.
So once I'd gotten out of the outfit and had started a business with a dear friend of mine who came out of the British teams, and so we were based in London, just trying to start to build a business, right? Intelligence, global security, information services, risk mitigation. We had no business experience, didn't know what the hell we were doing, right? But we were having a great time, and so at that very early time, a friend of ours who was a already successful showrunner in the UK called up, and he's a great guy, David Wollstonecroft, a terrific
Mm,
guy, terrific writer. Um, and so he was in between projects, and he was trying to figure out what to do next. And so we all got together for drinks, and we had more drinks, and then we drank more. And out of all of that, David put together a terrific show that in the UK was called Spooks, and then migrated over here where it was labeled MI5, and did very well. Ran for whatever 8 seasons on BBC, and so that sort of opened a door in a sense
hmm.
to TV work. And then the other thing that happened was we started to build our business a little bit. We opened an office in Washington D.C. Um, and one day, our investors, one of them came in and said, "Hey, who was it? What outlet? It was Fox News. Was looking for somebody." It was, I think, March of '03.
Okay.
We had just gone into Iraq, and our company had already had some people on the ground there, kind of, you know, doing
Doing
some work,
stuff.
doing stuff.
I just love watching you. Okay, I'm sorry. If you guys aren't watching this, you just watched his brain go, no, I can't say that. No, I can't say that. No, I can't say that. Doing some work.
Doing some stuff.
Doing some stuff.
Yeah, softening the target. And so anyway, one of the investors, a great guy, came running in and said they need somebody to talk about Iraq. So I had a quick conversation with my old folks saying, is that something I can do? I have no idea. And they said, yeah, don't say anything stupid, and obviously, no sources and methods or anything like that. But yeah, by all means, go. So we had some people there. So we had a kind of a sense of what was happening on the ground. And so what I realized, which I hadn't been smart enough to understand before, was all I had to do was show up on the network and they would put who I was, right? So they would say Mike Baker, and then they put the name of the company. And we had only been in business for a relatively short period of time. And so that was in that once I realized that and realized the value of it,
Mhm.
then you couldn't keep me off the air. So now I was like a talking head whore. Um, that was the other side of it. So I started doing a lot of the news, and then I was also getting more involved in the entertainment side of it as well. So
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of where we ended up.
It's interesting to see the transition. The reason I say that and the reason I bring it up is because you've got this dynamic shift happening, post Afghan, post Iraq, post this GWAT. Um, I say Afghan and Iraq just because I know Canadians and Brits don't really necessarily resonate with GWAT, so bear with me. But I will say we are seeing this rise of what we call the intelligence veteran celebrity kind of triangle of death. That is these talking heads that normally would get your ass PNG'd. So I'm trying to figure out how somebody with a stature like yourself in a time frame where we were looking for people we couldn't find to go onto a television and start necessarily just you know having a dialogue that seems so foreign. I mean, the idea of a
Yeah.
CIA member going out any other time prior to that, you're not allowed back on a base, you're losing security clearance, you're no longer allowed at funerals. Like, that's a real reality.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no. It depends on. I mean, it wasn't common. I'll tell you that much. It wasn't. That's why I was like very cautious at the very beginning of that
Mhm.
first Iraq incursion as to whether it was even kosher to do it or not. And so
Right.
but they were very clear. And said, yeah, yeah, by all means. In part because they had been very good to me when I decided it was time to leave. I was just going to leave. And, they were like, okay, well, what are you going to say you did? And I said, I don't know. It's like I import export, or I was selling rugs or something.
Right.
And so they said, no, we should come up with a way that you can say where you worked,
Mm.
you know, without. So they opened that door, and they again, they didn't have to do that, but they were very good about saying you should be able to leave in a somewhat overt fashion without going into gruesome detail about what it was you were doing on our behalf. Um, and so and that wasn't all that common. So I
Mm.
give them a lot of credit, and I'm very appreciative, because that certainly helped develop my business. Obviously, it gave me more. If I had to go out and say, yeah, I was worked at the Department of Commerce, or I was at the Secretary, I was at the Department of Labor or something. That's how I explain the almost 20-year gap in my resume. Then it might not have helped in terms of building a intelligence and security services firm down the
Right.
road. So I was very appreciative of the fact that they did that. But you're right. Then it's much more common now, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's much more common to see people that get out there. I mean, shit, former directors have written books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people have written books about it. And the only time I get a little aggrieved or irritated is when we'll get somebody who comes out after, like, maybe one tour. Maybe they didn't even do a tour. Maybe they just went through training. Maybe they did 1-2 year tour, and then they leave and they write a book about my life at the agency. And I'm thinking, really, really, how was that
Really?
life at the agency? But that's about the only time. Everything else, as long as people aren't disclosing things they shouldn't,
Right.
um, then I think the agency understands they needed to be a change. They needed to be a little bit more transparent. They needed to
Mm.
be, get a little bit of more light on the organization, because times are changing, and they need to still attract and try to recruit, um, the right people. And
And brought to you by Mindful Meds. You guys have been seeing me take Mindful Meds for a little while now. Mindful Meds is a premium supplement company dedicated to supplying humans with the tools to improve their mental health, clarity, and performance, all while supporting their growth along the way. Whether it's the Immunity Blend, Lion's Mane, Inspire, or Voyage, all of their products are clean, tested, consistent, and they've become a huge help in my life. I found Mindful Meds over a year ago now, and I've never looked back. Go check out their website, mindfulmeds.io, and use the code BRASS at checkout.
so that to do that, they can't just be this cloak and dagger organization that nothing about, right?
Right.
And so I think some of that openness has probably helped from a recruitment potential.
Yeah, I mean, it's so overt, it's covert. It's a brilliant way to do things. If you give a
Yeah.
little, you're going to get a lot more in return.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And so that's why they've got a Twitter page. Is it Twitter? No, it's X. They've got an X page.
It's X now, right? We can't.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not. I'm sorry. Can we just for a second? I don't X. I don't X. I
X.
tweet.
I know. I sent you an X. What I mean, yeah, it
That's
doesn't
not
work as
good.
well. It doesn't work as well. I know. I've stumbled over that one as well myself. But they've got one. They've got a page there, or a site, and their recruitment process is a little bit more open. Yeah, it didn't used to be that way, but I can see why they need to adjust to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's like come apply, not tap you on the shoulder while you're walking to school somewhere, right? Hey, take this phone
Yeah.
number.
Although that we still get some of our best recruits, and you'd be
Oh.
surprised. It's like toddlers. No,
Hey,
they have-
listen, y'all. You guys are no different than the service members. Let's be honest with ourselves. We all go into these practices, these positions, these jobs for a reason. We're a
Yeah.
type of person, and that's just the harsh reality. So they know who you are, and they know what they're looking for. And if you haven't applied, they'll make you apply. They think that they want you.
They'll make you apply.
They'll subtly position your entire life to fall apart in your dream job so that when they tap you on the shoulder, it's like, oh my God, timing is everything, Mike.
Yeah. Wow. This works out very well.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, transition like nothing. So let's talk
Yes.
about the transition. God, that word's weird to use around you because I'm not using it in the way it's being used, but we're going to use it. So transition for you was
Yeah. This will be a
much
shock to all the neighbors, won't it? Yeah.
well.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike, if you were the one guy who came out the next time you went on Rogan, it was like, listen, I'm
Yeah.
going as Michelle now.
I got something to talk about.
Oh
It's
my-
gonna be, yeah.
But you don't change your voice though in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I God bless anybody who wants to do whatever the hell they want to. And I always say the same thing, which is I don't give a shit what anybody wants. I really don't care.
Right.
I don't need to celebrate it. They don't need to celebrate me. Nobody needs to celebrate me. No, I don't need to celebrate you. Just get on with it. As long as you're not hurting anybody, God bless, and I hope you're happy. Who
Yeah.
cares? Life is too
Well,
short.
can you imagine if that was the actual rhetoric we lived around, which is who cares? Move
Yeah,
on, live your life.
yeah, yeah. It would be pretty simple, right? I mean, anyway.
Okay. Yeah, but we got to create our own problems to have a reason to fight, don't we? Sorry, that's just me. I digress. Back to transition.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, if you listen to the episode that was released on trigonometry yesterday, you will see I have some minor good points.
So that's what they said when they first sent me a note. They said, yeah, we believe that she occasionally. Okay, I think they said
Occasionally.
occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
1
like,
out of 10. It's 1 out of 10. We do the best we can. Listen, we all try.
pretty good
Let's
ratio.
talk.
Yeah.
Fuck this is too good. So the reason I bring up the transition point for you and why you're able to do it is so many of the listeners around the world are in this sticky transition point from a combat arms role, a intelligence role, a policing role, and they're going into this, the civilian world where anybody can be whatever they want to be and do whatever they want to do. And we come from very different spaces. And to step into those worlds, you did transition really successfully over. And it sounds like it was due to having a whole host of options at your disposal, meaning you had permissions, you weren't P&G'd, you kind of did it right, and then you transitioned to a new area. And like you said, it ended up uplifting your business. So I'm just trying to always ask people when they're going from something as heavy hitting as the CIA to their own intelligence world, how that was able to be mitigated in terms of, I mean, you have a family, you've spoken about it before, so I'm not going to go too deep into it because I try to respect people's private lives, even though you have pictures of your children behind you. I try to be, is that your daughter with the
Oh,
baseball?
yeah. No, yeah, that's my main man.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's your guy up there?
That's my son, Jason. Yeah.
I'm talking about the girl to the bottom left of you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, see, I catch things. Listen, we're not all CIA, but we're paying attention here, Mike. But I'm trying to figure it out to give people the right answers, because you did have a family, you did have children, you came from a world that was very different, and you did transition into something that opened you up to criticism, opened your family up to potential security concerns. And I'm just trying to understand how somebody transitions successfully and still is able to, find themselves within that. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, at the time, I had a daughter, a very young daughter, who I mean, she wasn't, how old was she? Golly, she was, I guess, 10 or so, and so I needed to find a way to stay home more because I was at that point I was a single dad, and so I needed to be home because that was important. It seemed to me that was important.
I mean, life is important to look after.
That might be important if I'm taking care of my daughter. And she didn't give a shit what I was doing, right? She didn't care that what I was doing was cool. She wanted me home, I'll sit on the floor playing with Legos. And so that was my reason for.
Hey humans, I know you've all been seeing me drink HVMN's Ketone IQ lately. This is a game changer. Jet fuel in a bottle. I use Ketone IQ for everything in my life, whether it's running, cycling, podcasting, or just the extra boost that my brain needs. I won't lie, it helps push me to the next level in all things. I love Ketone IQ and what HVMN stands for. Go grab some shots today at hvmn.com and use the code BRASS20 and save.
Transitioning. I had to find something that would keep me from being out on the road all the time. And so I think for me, the biggest, most important step was just leaping into it. Right, I had no idea what we were going to do. I had this close friend of mine. We had an idea because he was getting out at the same time, and we had an idea. Well, whatever we were going to do, let's team up because we get along great. And be a lot of laughs, but we didn't really know what the hell we were doing. We didn't have any money. I can assure you of that. And we had no credit. we couldn't, between he and I, we couldn't even get cell phones, and we were in London. And so, but what we did do was didn't do it half-assed. We didn't keep one foot in our previous world and one foot in the new world. And you'll get that a lot of times with transition. I talk to a lot of guys who, okay, I'm going to take a contract, right? So I'm going to
Yes.
stay with what I know, but I want to do this other thing. And at least for me anyway, I think what led us to actually having some luck was we had no other option, right? We just jumped in. We didn't have a clue how we were going to put food on the tables. And so when you do that, and when you commit 100% to whatever it is that you're going to do next, there's no plan B, right? You got to make that work. And so that for us, and I'm sure some people will listen to that from a business perspective and go, that's stupid. You should always have a plan B.
Not stupid if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's always stupid if it doesn't work. And so yeah, we got, and also the agency, and my buddy's, operational unit, he was with SBS. They teach you certain things, right? And they teach you to just get on with it. They teach you to, basically make decisions with imperfect information. They teach you how to just, get off the X and make a decision, which is important. And some people just sit around and wait for all the data to come in, and eventually something bad's going to happen. So I think that was the biggest, if I had to point to one defining factor, that was the biggest thing, was we just had no other option. And so we had to get out. I've talked to a lot of guys who are looking to get out. They're looking to do that transition. And the other, one other part here is they undervalue their experience, right? And they don't understand how that works. And they don't understand, everything they've learned. They have a hard time imagining how that benefits a company or a corporation.
Immensely.
Immensely, yeah. And so they've got to get over that. They've got to understand that what they've learned, and it's a two-way thing. Companies and corporations need to understand the value of bringing in people from that world, right?
Right.
But the individual needs to have more confidence in all those things that they've picked up that they may not even realize they've learned, right? They can apply or be adapted to a commercial setting. So you spend some time talking with them and trying to explain, look, no, understand what it is that, and how you package that up and present it, right, is obviously different than how you would do it if you were in the military or wherever. But so I think there's certain elements that can help ease the transition. But it is it's a big step. If I hear one thing more than anything, it's the difficulty in moving on, right? Plus, also you're dealing with the emotional side of it, right? You've got that camaraderie, and you've got, and depending on what kind of team operations you were in, and that's tough to replicate, right?
Near damn impossible.
Yeah, it's damn near impossible. But you've got to find, we've been lucky. I've been lucky, and I found all sorts of new challenges, right? They're not the same challenges, but it's. So I think you have to, I know a lot of guys that I worked with, that when we get together, or there's a lot of talk about the old days, right? Yeah, I had a great time, but I don't necessarily need to
rehash that.
Rehash the old days all the time, right? I'd rather talk about some things happening now, or shit that we're going to do later. And so anyway.
Yeah, it's about looking forward. And I appreciate your perspective on that. And the reason I pry at it, and I'm sure you've been asked this stuff before, but I think it's important to illustrate the importance of getting off the X and taking that risk and jumping in with 2 fucking feet. Because part of the problem we see in this community, and, we got the 44 a day. These numbers are not, they're not pretend. There's a reason why the statistic is constantly growing. There is something missing. We're missing the mark here. And it's not like we're adjusting after you drop around. We just keep dropping. We just keep dropping and expecting a different result, which is quite literally ridiculous. So when I talk to anybody that has had such a successful transition from a very intense position, it's really important to try to gather data, because people are listening to this are going to go, well, if this guy can get out after such a, prolific career in the CIA and move into an area that's maybe adjacent or linear to, but is ultimately stepped all the way over, because you get that that dynamic that happens where it's 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And like you said, when you're doing that, you're constantly going to be pulling backwards, and you're meeting with friends and you're drinking and talking about the past. And so when you're ruminating on these experiences, it's of course important to acknowledge, because unlike the rest of the service, the CIA, they don't talk about when people are lost. We don't say names. There's reasons why they're stars, and that's it. But when you get those opportunities to embrace those moments and discuss those people, I understand the importance of keeping the names alive. That being said, if it's constantly holding you back in a position where it is not allowing you to then fulfill what is ultimately the future of where you're going, not where you've been, this is where I believe the lack of purpose, lack of direction, and the lack of seeing people do it really successfully happens. And then it's that, pattern of behavior.
Yeah, I think there's a, there's a concern, like someone's getting out. There's this feeling like, okay, I need a safety net. Now, particularly, yeah, of course, if you you got a partner, you got kids, whatever, then of course that's a factor, right? You gotta worry about that sort of thing. But I'm just saying that if you kind of half-ass it, right? If you got 1 foot in and 1 foot out,
Yeah.
you're not gonna realize your potential really on either side, right? And so it can be painful, and it can be I suppose, a little frightening. But for what it's worth, I mean, that's always my advice: is look, don't do that. Don't. And I know a lot of guys, and they want to do the contracting overseas, and because the daily rate looks good and okay, but that doesn't give you the opportunity to pursue whatever that new challenge is full time, because you're deploying 4 or 6 weeks or whatever, and you come back and now you're still thinking about deploying. And so I used to actually discourage guys, and we had during the height of the whole mess out in Iraq, we had maybe 400 people out there, but I used to discourage people from doing it, because I said, look, if your focus is on the future,
right,
this is a grind, right? This is not going to get you there quicker. It may feel safer. You may like the money in the short term, but think about it in a different way. Get a longer view, perhaps.
What's comfortable.
Yeah. And I realize people can listen to me say things like that and go, well, you're a douchebag. You got lucky and you did it, so it's easy for you. It's like when somebody's wealthy and somebody's saying, I don't mind paying more taxes. Well, you already got $2 billion, and now of course you don't mind paying more taxes, But so I get why people might go, okay, well, you're a bit of a douche.
No, you're not a douche. And I'll tell you why. I tell you, it'd be like, Mike, you're a douche for saying that. You're not. The reason you're not is because you did exactly what you just verbalized, where you said, I did not keep 1 foot in the other, and I actually just took the fucking risk. I got off the X. The reason you're successful today is because you got off the X. It's not because you kind of danced in both worlds. It's because you did exactly what you are advising others to do. That is called lived experience. And that's why you're not a douche. Now, you'd be a douche.
Well, I could be.
Yeah. Well, you could be, and you would be if you did the opposite of what you said.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah. So I get what. Yeah, that's right. I take it back. I am not a douche. You know what? I'm actually quite a quality person. Yeah.
I think you're a good guy. And also, again, back to the good points.
Well, let's just end on that note then. What a fine gentleman he is.
What a great gentleman this Mike Baker is. No, I have too many questions for you to end on that. I'm so sorry. I apologize. But no, I have a lot for you. Okay. So I appreciate your perspective on that. And I think that it's incredibly noble to be able to look back, and plot lines, but ultimately you did exactly what you said you would do. You took the risk and you didn't have a fallback, and it was successful because you went 100% in. So it's a good example, not a douchebag move. That being said, going to the TV side of things is a huge undertaking. But let's talk a little bit more about not only the TV side, because I've seen Black Files Declassified on Discovery and the Science Channel, and I do really appreciate it. I do appreciate the authenticity you bring to TV. I don't know how you go about not cursing on that while you're doing it.
No. One of the guys is behind the camera. They hired a guy on the set that all he does is hold a big sign up saying "Don't swear," and just follows me around everywhere. So that's how I remember. No, there's a lot of. If you saw some of the cut footage that never makes it to the show, there's a lot of profanity.
That's
Uh,
okay.
yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
why people have such an issue with sounds out of the mouths. I've been told that I do that too much, but I think that there's a time and place for it and it's valued. And if it's a member
Mm.
of the CIA, I feel like it's baked into their genetics and everyone should get over themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, well, again, back to these good points that I make.
Yeah.
I want to understand how you jump from, declassified to the presidential daily brief. I know there was a gap in there and you
Mm.
started doing podcasting, but like you really started to and I mean this in like the kindest, loving, motherly energy I can put through this screen right now because you didn't want to fly to Vancouver, which was you're not the guy I would have thought that was like, yep, let's just put myself out there. Let's jump into the podcast world. Let's just dive into the uncomfortable things. Was it the whiskey draw?
Yeah.
Sitting and
Yeah.
drinking?
It was the free whiskey. That's what it
I
was.
knew it.
It's just- I don't get paid for it. They just send me crates of booze. Uh, so and I get liquored up and I do another episode. No, it's you know what, it was actually pretty straightforward because yeah, we were supposed to do we were contracted to do a third season for Black Files Declassified.
Mm-hmm.
And then the network merged with Warner Brothers. And as always happens in TV land, when you have a merger of any sort, the first thing that the new people in charge want to do is fire all the old people. So they shit canned all the really high quality production folks, including our team that was advocating and doing our show. So they called and said, we're going to put it on ice for the time being, which in TV terms means it's never, ever going to see the light of day again. And so we set that aside. We're working on a couple other series, but then I forget when it was, but it was we started the PDB. We started the President's Daily Brief in September of last year, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sometime shortly before then when I got a call from the folks that do the PDB and a variety of other shows and podcasts, and they said, "Would you be interested in hosting this?" And I'm not an idiot. I've been on podcasts before. I've seen
No,
the extent of Joe's operations, which are really interesting and unique. And
I cannot say I
so
have.
yeah,
So.
he's so I knew the world to some degree, and I also knew that this was going to be backed up by a really good supporting group of people who know what they're doing, right? So the producers, the people who have invested in it, the writers and researchers. So yeah, it was something that I thought, and also because I'd been opening my yap for a long time, saying that too much of news is opinionated, right? And there's nobody in the center. There's nobody who's just trying to the degree possible, just give you the facts.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, this could be a good chance. So I won't say that it doesn't have my bias in there every now and then, or that I don't throw some context in there. But for the most part, we just try to say what's happening with the top 3 or 4 stories of the day. And then move on. And we don't have any choice because it's only 20 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. So you can't bang on and be too opinionated in a time like that. And I don't think anybody needs to hear more opinion necessarily. So while occasionally I might throw out a comment and people go, oh, that's interesting. Most of the time I'm just literally trying to stick to the facts of the particular issue.
Right.
So that's kind of how it happened. I it wasn't a tough decision because it was, it's a real quality group of people, First TV, and, they're backed by an operation called Red Seat Ventures. And so it's really good operation. So that made it a lot easier. If somebody called up and said, Mike, you want to do it all by yourself and from scratch, then that's a different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have been fine either way. I do appreciate the length of the episodes. You can crush a few of them in a row. It does affect your psyche after, and you go, all right, that's a lot for today. But it's interesting
Yeah.
to hear how you switch from topic to topic. And I do appreciate that you do put because it is, how do I describe this? When you listen to it, it is very much, you can tell that you are reverberating data points, but
Mhm.
then you hear the, what I call like the Mike Baker little clip snips there at the end that are
Oh,
just kind of smacked in the middle. And that's your authenticity coming through, where you're like, you're giving those not opinions, but you're kind of like, yeah, that's accurate, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Like you
that's
just kind of
bullshit.
drop it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like bullshit from the UN.
Right.
Uh, yeah, yeah, it is. It is. I do firmly believe, even though, like I said, occasionally I'll throw a little something in there, but I do firmly believe that the problem we've got nowadays is that everything is so siloed, and the
Right.
news that we receive is so opinionated, right? That
Yeah.
people don't know where to go just for some news, right? The
Right.
old news. So you used to be able to turn on CNN. CNN in its early days was fantastic operation. They had field bureaus all over the world. Something happened, they just tell you what was happening, right? It
Right.
wasn't because they weren't trying to, play beat the clock against Fox News. And when Fox News started to have a lot of success on the
Mhm.
right, that pushed all the other news outlets hard left because they're trying to figure out what's our differentiator. So
Mm.
then you end up with that, and people are all standing around going, well, where do I just get some news? And it can be tough. So we're trying to do that with the PDB to the degree possible.
So then you're recording every day because these are real time events constantly changing. How's that been adapting to your already having an intelligence company schedule?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because, um, yeah, you have to really worry about the upload times. And
Yep.
so the morning, we do late night the night before,
Yep.
and so we try to make sure that we're not missing out on it. Now we may get screwed, right? Because overnight there may be some massive development. The next morning, we've already uploaded the show, and people are going, well, how come the idiot missed, this new development? So, and then we do the afternoon. Again, we kind of lag, and we wait and wait and wait as long as possible to do the
Mm.
afternoon. So we capture as much as we can in terms of developments. It's so it is interesting, but look, I've been lucky with the business, and so Portman Square Group, for all your information and security needs, it kind of runs not without me, but sometimes I seem a little superfluous. Uh, uh, and so I've been lucky that way, in that there's a lot of great people,
Right.
keeping those trains running on time. That allows me to, but it doesn't take too much time. The draft scripts arrive. We have a chance to review them and edit them. And so we've kind of gotten into a good routine. We're going to turn this into a YouTube channel
Oh,
in the near
fantastic.
future. Yeah. And then we're going to start doing, I don't know, bi-weekly or bi-monthly. I forget. An interview version of it. So it's a longer version, and then still keeping the PDB,
Mm.
morning and afternoon thing going. So it's been great so far.
I think it's
But
a great show, man. And I
yeah,
mean, it's number one for a reason.
yeah, it's been fun. It's really has been fun. And I'll tell you the other thing about it is it's easy because it's just interesting shit, right? And in the sense
Yeah.
that, I'm not talking about something I'm not interested in. I'm talking about foreign policy and national issues and crises and domestic concerns and other things. So at least it's interesting shit. If I was talking about something that I don't have any background in or don't really care about, then I think it would be a grind. Uh,
Mm.
but I think it's interesting. And we get to cover shit that other people don't necessarily talk about or they don't hear about.
Or
Uh,
want to.
yeah. So I mean, it's something's happening in wherever, Venezuela, or the farmer protests in Europe, or whatever it may be. You get to highlight other developments. Now the world seems a little fucked up right now. So you're right. You can listen to one or two episodes and think, God, what the hell's wrong here? Putin's threatening to use nukes, and
Oh,
Macron's threatening to put NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine, and
I have so many
Kim Jong
questions.
Un's blasting another missile, and
Mm.
oh God,
Oh, Michael, I
yeah.
have so many questions for you. All right. Well, since you just dove into it, I mean, feels like a normal transition here, so we might as well. Here's the difference between maybe a lot of shows that just ask you about you. These I want to talk about a few of these issues. Like with the
Sure.
PBR, it's great and everything like that, but I want to pull a few things apart. And kind of prepping for this episode, I was thinking to myself, what world issues are we going to talk about? And then I listed 30. And part of the problem with that is because there's so much going on that so many people, like you said, the media won't discuss. Sure as shit in Canada, CBC isn't. We
Yeah,
know why.
yeah.
And I want to understand a lot a lot more about some of these things. And I know we have limited time, but I want to crack on a few of these because you're not hearing about them on a lot of podcasts unless it's like Lex or Joe or Trig. And I think there is a difference with some of those people versus what this show can bring. And the difference is really simply like this stuff doesn't have to be overcomplicated, and a lot of our listeners are coming from this world. So let's just start with any topic. I'm going to go with France because I'm a little blown away by the verbiage that was said out loud by this individual who pledged actual boots on the ground in a nation who strategically and very obviously on Tucker Carlson's last interview stated like, we have come to the table, we're trying, they're not trying, and now we're saying an escalation of force while not clearing it with everyone else. Does that not feel like an escalation of World War III level shit here, Mike?
Yeah, it's a very odd comment. I mean, for those people that hadn't been following, Emmanuel Macron said, essentially that you have to leave everything on the table. You can't rule out putting NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine to help Ukraine defeat Russia. And they're almost within
your face says everything.
Yeah, within 30 seconds. Yeah, I mean everybody was jumping in there. Olaf Scholz from Germany and the Spanish, the Italians, the U.S. Everybody was backpedaling, saying, "Whoa, what the hell?" And so Macron, I mean, he then doubled down later on. He didn't back off of it. I think he thought he had been clever by saying everything has to be on the table, and somehow he thought this was a good strategic move. But all it did was play into Putin's hand, who's been trying to pitch this as the motherland against NATO, and NATO being the aggressor, and so that plays right into Putin's narrative that he tries to feed to his home front. Didn't help, and then of course Putin, kind of alluded to the nuclear issue in terms of that would demand a nuclear response. Now, I don't think he's serious. He's not an irrational actor, and he knows that's a kind of a non-starter. All he wants is to stay in power, and I think for the same reason that Xi is always a little bit cautious over tipping too far to one side, is that he also doesn't want to envelop or embrace chaos, right? Mm-hmm. So you never know where that's going to shake out. So I think it'll be fine, but it was a strange move on Macron's part, and I think NATO, the Allied Command and everybody else is trying to figure out what the hell was he smoking, or did he not have his meds leveled out, or what? It just didn't make any sense for him to do that.
It not only didn't make sense, I don't understand how. I just can't picture him clearing this and then getting up there and other people going, yes, that's a strategic, intelligent thing to say on a world's platform, while not discussing it in a way, and the repercussions of those words. This is what I see, and maybe I'm wrong, and you can feel free to correct me. It feels like the majority of the individuals dealing with this massive situation, this pushback with Russia, the egos that are at play here are so astronomically large. Most of them don't fit in the goddamn room together. And so I'm concerned that there is this boasting, this we're just going to send them. We're strong people. We're going to send them anyway. We don't care what you say you're going to do because we don't really think you're going to hit the button. It's like we're poking at the lion through the cage with a stick, waiting for him to snap. And is it because they want him to react so that we can then turn around and start firing up that machine again?
No, I think it's with Macron. I think that was an outlier comment. Okay. He didn't clear that with anybody, and there was so much pushback that I think it's clear in Putin's mind too. Again, he said what you would expect. Usually he uses Medvedev to rattle the nuclear saber, but Putin this time around felt he'd say it. It was during a State of the Union address. And so I think, again, there's an understanding, I think, that we need to find an off-ramp here. And the problem is going to be that Putin's not going to give up Crimea, right?
No.
not without a fight. The only way that Ukraine gets the negotiating table in a strong position is if they're winning, or they're holding Putin to a very strong and painful stalemate. And right now, the Russian military has not a massive advantage, but a slight advantage. They're on the offensive, which again, in terms of this, is sort of like a World War I offensive. Doesn't mean much, but they're the only ones gaining ground. And they certainly feel as if they've got the upper hand, right? Because they see Western support, not necessarily from EU or NATO, but certainly from the US wavering. And if the US doesn't provide significant assistance and resources, then Ukraine isn't going to win. And so if you look at it that way and think, okay, well, then what prompts Putin to sit down at the negotiating table? Well, it's only if he feels like he's, again, losing or really facing some potential instability at home because of the painful, war of attrition. So they've got to figure this one out. They're not going to be able to reclaim Crimea in the current configuration. So Zelensky's going to have to, I think, rethink this posturing that he had about we're going to reclaim all our territory. Nobody gave a shit in the West about Crimea being in the Russian hands, right? Didn't know,
No.
Obama administration didn't do shit about that. And nobody waved their Ukrainian flags and said, we stand with Ukraine. And nobody cared that they had troops in Eastern Ukraine for some time now, until this invasion. So I think the logical thing is to figure out a pathway to get back to that. And then, it's just the sad reality that we've gone through, 2+ years of painful, lives lost and, resources used. And what did it get us? Well, I think it probably, pragmatically, it'll get us back to where we started before the invasion.
That's just a really sad reality when you think about the amount of governments that have been putting up substantial amount of money that apparently doesn't exist for veterans, homeless, addicts, or anything else in their own nations, but somehow is magically being found by people like Trudeau and Biden. And I'm trying to understand and try to be optimistic around this idea, because it's a very clearly, and I think the majority of people who had any wherewithal that pay attention to anything, and I'm not talking about CNN and Fox, but maybe individuals who served prior or whatever their experience, it became very obvious it was going to be a proxy war. It became very obvious this was going to be, we're just going to funnel money through because we don't want to put boots on the ground, because we know that's the line in the sand for nukes. And I'm not understanding how we can continue to pledge funds like our sad example of a dictator just recently did again, stating that we're going to dump more and more and more fucking funds into something that is we have people on the ground.
Yeah.
We have strategic Americans and Canadians in Ukraine, training people, doing the job, while a lot of the Ukrainians I'm getting reports of are using sweatpants and sticks to practice movements. So what I'm trying to understand is, where's that money going? How are we honestly believing that it's going to the front line? And if it is going to the front line, why aren't we seeing it?
Yeah. Well, we're not seeing it in part because we've been really slow, right? And regardless of where anybody stands on whether they should even be providing support or not, from an operational perspective, which is what I'm talking about, they've been really slow in providing the advanced systems, right? Whether it's HIMARS or it doesn't, whatever, the long range missile systems that can have a real impact. So the problem is, and again, this is aside from the fact of whether you agree with the whole process or not. I'm just saying that's why we're not seeing the progress, is because we've been so slow in getting out. They're not going to get the first drop of F-16s until I think June, right? And air superiority is massive in these terms. And so I think there would have been a way, if we'd said, okay, yeah, we're doing this proxy thing, but we're going to do it all in. We either do it or you don't half-ass it.
Right.
Then it would have been a matter of getting those systems out to them sooner so that they could really inflict the pain that you need than to get Putin to either retreat or sit down and have a meaningful negotiation and settle this thing and end it, right? So we've the West in general has kind of done this where we want to feel good about ourselves by helping, but we don't want to escalate the conflict. And so we're not going to, so we really haven't done anything other than extend the process And again, my concern is that we're walking into a situation where at the end of the day, people are going to say, "What the fuck was that all about?" Right? It's a
Well,
little
you
bit like
mean
Afghanistan. 20
you
years
mean
in
like
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, yeah. Now, what was that all about? We didn't. What do you mean? We didn't turn them into a democracy? So
Oh, we just gave them fruit boots, a bunch of Blackhawks, and have them roll down Kabul,
yeah,
taking girls out of
yeah,
school again. That feels like a good 20 years waste of my goddamn time and friends' lives. But
yes.
hey, who am I to say
So
anything,
I
right?
know.
Well, that brings me to
Yeah,
the
but yeah,
Afghan pullout.
part of the problem is explaining to the public, whether it's the French public or the Brits or the Canadians or the U.S., having an administration that says this is why we're doing this. This is what we're spending. This is what we're spending it on. This is how we know it's going where it's supposed to go. The administrations have a responsibility to be, within reason, as transparent as possible, and that would probably help tamp down some of this. I mean, look, people wore the Iraq and Afghanistan pain for a long time. We're 2 years into Ukraine, and everybody's like, "What the fuck are we doing?" Right?
We're
So
fatigued already.
yeah, we're fatigued already. So I don't know, but I do think I think Putin was wrong on a lot of counts. He was wrong in a lot of ways. You imagine this was going to splinter NATO. NATO's actually grown. He was wrong in terms of evaluating his own military's capabilities and command and control and all sorts of problems there. But I think what he got right was probably the impatience, right, of the West,
Mhm.
and the fact that we lose interest, relatively quickly.
Could
So I feel, I suspect his calculation is he can outweigh us, and in particular the U.S.
Well, let's be completely honest. Why wouldn't he believe that? Look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq, look at all of these places we pledged to go into and constantly, we're going to give democracy, we're going to give freedoms, we're going to give and act as if these cultures want that behavior.
Right.
You cannot win against people. I mean, it's the reason why it's like the death of the empires in the Middle East. Like, we understand there's a reason why I fought against people with Soviet weapons. They will outlast us. We know that.
Mhm.
Of course, Russia is going to have this belief system.
Yeah.
They've seen it. We have so many examples in Putin's time that can point to they will fatigue. The people are so hyper distracted and strategically placed so that they just don't have the capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I think and so he's made that calculation, and that's really at the end of the day, I think what he's banking on.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Look, I suspect the U.S. will figure. Man, I think they're already knee deep in it. They're figuring out a way to get munitions over there and just bypass the dysfunctional nature of Congress anyway. I mean, they're dysfunctional on many levels, right? I mean, again, they're arguing over this bill, but half of them don't even know why they're arguing it over it, and it's not enough to just say we should take all that money and spend it at home, right? You need to be able to multitask. So there will be occasions when you need to spend money on issues overseas that don't impact, but they should also be functioning so that they say we're going to they're going to spend money on the homeless situation, on vets, on the things that meant on infrastructure here, right? Build a fucking bridge, do something,
Or a
and
wall by the looks of it.
you can multitask and also worry about those occasions that take place overseas where you really legitimately need to say, okay, do we have a role here? Do we need to play a role here? Is there some reason why we're here? And what is it? And then we have to explain it to the American public or to, again, whatever nation we're talking about. So I don't know, but Washington, D.C., look, we don't send our best and brightest. We've got some really good ones. Don't get me wrong. There's some very good, politicians. And I know a handful of them that are based in Idaho. God bless Idaho. And we tend to have really good politicians. Idaho's got a great system too. It's legislature. It's the state house. It's part time. They only they're in session for 3 months, and they all go back to their ranches or to their businesses, do whatever they do. They come in. They've never run a deficit, right?
Wow.
Never. There's no such thing as deficit spending in this state. The governor doesn't have a mansion, lives in his house, walks down the street. You walk by, go, hey, Brad, what's going on, man? And, it's the way that you feel government should be, right?
Right.
It's, so anyway, but on average, you could argue some of the folks that the country sends to Washington, D.C. may not be our best and brightest.
It just feels like they're delusional, completely out of touch, and not at all integrated into their societies, populations, and communities. And that's why I like your government. And I'm surprised you even say where you live and which state, to be honest with you. But I do love that you talk about it in that way, because I think if more people realized there was a possibility to be able to go back to that, then people wouldn't be so separated. The gaps of what Americans and Canadians and the rest of the world need could actually be discussed. But there seems to be this growing rules for what is it, rules for we and not for thee, or rules for thee and not for we, you know, that whole saying. You know, you got the Klaus
Thee and
Schwab's.
we, thee and me, thy and them. I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, I know what you mean, though. I remember the saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's two individuals over here that are just trying to get by on this conversation here, Mike. So I find it fascinating, though, the way that it works, because it does feel like every year that goes by in all of these different states and in these different countries, there is this growing separation. And that, to me, is how I feel like these decisions are being made on top of these bills that are so astronomically large. They do things strategically to slip them in where you're not consciously aware of what's going in. And then they have the audacity to allow people to vote on things they know they haven't read.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, we have to pass the bill to know what's in it. You know, you think like how does the American public put up with some bullshit statement like that, right? Say no, and you know, the other funny, not funny, but odd little mystery about Washington D.C. is most of those bills are written by, you know, kids in their mid-20s, right? Who were out drinking the night before, and you know, they're drafting bills because, you know, it's not like your senator and your congressman are doing that work. So you get these junior sprogs that are out there writing bills of importance to the nation. It's an interesting situation. You take the self-interest out of it, get term limits, you know, have some meaningful campaign finance reform, and I think we'd see a bit of a sea change. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you got to give it a try. And there's nothing wrong with term limits. There's nothing wrong with saying a congressman can serve 2 4-year terms. Right now they're 2-year terms, which means they're in a perpetual money raising cycle. And senators could have 2 6-year terms. So that's it. And then you go back and you do whatever you were doing for a living. But take some of that self-interest. There's no reason why someone should finish up as a politician after 46 years and be very wealthy when
with
they didn't
$100 million in the bank.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense to me. Why do we put up with it? But anyway, I just stared down that rabbit hole, didn't I?
No, I love those rabbit holes. These are the holes I like to live in, Mike. So let's pull into some more. Ready?
Okay.
Canada. This is one of my favorite ones. And let me tell you why. I live here. We've got a lot of wild things happening up here, and I am concerned because the CCP have been here. They were here in 2020. The militaries were training in Connaught Range and on the outside of Canada. We saw them marching. No one can tell me otherwise. Salt Spring Island held them there. And we do have these people coming in to this country. I live in what I call, most people aren't going to love this one, Vancouver. And it's because we put extra taxes in because people come and drop their kids and their money in these really wealthy mansions and give them Lambos to drive down Granville at 180 miles an hour. So what I'm trying to understand here is, why is it that America's hat's so on fire? The CCP have knowingly, while CSIS has reported, been inside of our government for a very long time, making heavy decisions while buying up all the property. So why is it you're laughing because you know I'm so goddamn right, and that's what scares the hell out of you. So why is it that we are so blindly, openly, and honestly inviting in to train, to educate in our governments, in our school systems, and everywhere else around us? Why are we allowing the CCP to do what they're doing? And they are coming in droves through America all the way into the United States, and they're all fighting age males. So what the hell is ye planning, and why are the CCP so allowed to walk amongst this country in Canada while having CCP offices like police stations, and then taking them and sending them back to China? What is going on, Mike?
Yeah, that was a lot there. That was a lot there. Yeah.
Hey, listen, I do some research, bud.
You're a very aggrieved individual. So yeah, it's true. Look, I mean, we had more across the southern border the last quarter of this past year of 2023, I think, compared to the last quarter of 2022, I think the increase in number of single male Chinese individuals crossing the border jumped by 80%, 85%. It was a significant increase, and That's just for one quarter.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, look, there's an awful lot there. Um, we've been very slow over the years. I've said this, I don't know how many times. We've been very slow over the years in calling out the Chinese regime, not the Chinese people, not going after
No.
the history and culture. Fantastic, right? I'm talking about
Yes.
Xi and his regime, and he's cemented power like nobody since Mao, basically. And we've been very slow in calling them out for a lot of things, including theft of intelligence, theft of economic information, of intellectual property, of research and development. And they've been doing that for decades, right? You go back, this is not something new, right? They've been hoovering up information from the US and Canada and UK and all over. They're equal opportunity for generations. And that's how they bypassed a lot of the heavy lift of research and development and got to the world's second largest economy, and they believe they should be on the top of the heap. So they'll continue doing that. And occasionally, Obama, stood there with Xi and said, well, we've, agreed to not engage in cyber shenanigans, and what a load of bullshit. So then
Okay.
the Xi regime just doubled down and spent more time doing it. Look, we really didn't have a dialogue about um, Chinese theft of intellectual property and what that means, the damage that it does to the U.S. and allies. We didn't really have that conversation until the previous administration. And now, like him or not like him, with Trump, he did talk about China, obviously,
Yeah.
all the time. And there was an effort to, and just the fact that you're shining a spotlight on the problem, it makes it better, right? It at least it makes companies, corporations, and others aware of, wait a minute, yeah, I guess there is a problem here. So we need to focus. And I know for a fact that was happening because we run an intelligence and security business. And we started hearing a lot more from companies going, well, how do I protect myself if we're doing business over there? And that increased over the past handful of years. But we've been very slow in recognizing the threat and in dealing with it. And they gather information in all sorts of ways, sending students over here to attend undergrad and graduate school, and then they end up getting a job at Raytheon or wherever, attending conferences and academic, events where we're just handing out information, recruiting Chinese Americans as an example to provide intel, if they're working for Dow or whomever, give us, some of the, information that you have access to, and they kind of play off of that, Chinese descent, and sort of reaching back to the homeland. There's a myriad of ways that they're there, and then cyber shenanigans. There's a myriad of ways that they're gathering their information. That to me is the most egregious part. There's the other issues. There's their aggressiveness in particularly the South China Sea and
The next one.
and elsewhere. Yeah, and there's Taiwan. There's the massive growth that they put into their military, particularly their Navy. There's the infiltration of our telecom systems, selling low-cost gear to regional telecoms providers. And these guys are like, sure, I'll take this gear. It's cheaper. And then the next thing you know, they're running their entire regional telecoms business off of, Chinese gear. And, then suddenly everyone's surprised when they realize that, well, wait a minute, one of the reasons they might have been doing this is because they can, it's got dual purpose, right?
Are people not like, are they banking? Are the Chinese at this point banking on the Western world's drive for financial relief? This idea that we can do things cheaper and easier because they've quite literally changed the way the psyche works in terms of, as long as it's cheap enough, then it's right for us.
Yeah. I think part of it is the lure of the Chinese market, right? That's been the holy grail for a long time for a lot of companies. Is we want to be able to sell into the Chinese market. So you want to engage and develop relationships and do business, and oftentimes that means transactions are going both ways. Some of it is just certainly on the telecom side. Look, finally, the FBI, which spends a lot of time on Chinese counterintelligence issues, they did some very good investigating and realizing that, look, there is no reason for these companies, supposed private companies, but they're state-sponsored companies over China, to be selling equipment at such a low cost. There's no profit motive for them. So what are they doing? No, well, in part, it's access to, towers, and whether those towers are located near military facilities or whatever it may be. And part of it is just getting up the fact that we now have the ability to access and control or disrupt, right, or telecoms systems in the event that there's a major conflict, right? It's the same reason why they're testing and probing our infrastructure all the time in cyberspace, is because they want a playbook for, should there ever be a major conflict, how do we take down the basic systems, stop your transportation, stop your flow of fuel and food, disrupt power grids, disrupt water treatment facilities. So there's a lot of reasons why they do that. But yeah, look, I'm not a big fan of decoupling. I think that's stupid because we're all connected, and that, horse has left the barn. But we do need to be much more pragmatic and smart about how we do business with China. And we got to stop, believing somehow that if we just, give up a little something, that somehow we're going to have access to this massive market and, things are going to be good. That's not how they work. They don't have a rule of law over there. And again, not denigrating Chinese people. I'm just saying what the regime is all about.
Yeah, it's not about the people. Like, I think the thing that a lot of people don't understand about China is that if you are a privately owned company, you're not fully private. You're not private. They own the controlling of every single business. They have even 1% more than you to make sure that they have the controlling interest in a lot of these industries. And that could be small or large. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. They have the controlling interest. And if you mess around with these factories and you mess around with these people and you don't pay something, it's not the company that has the issue. That person then disappears. And I've seen it personally. And I will tell you a story later about that, Mike. And so I find it
But it is
fascinating.
true. And it's not like ByteDance or Huawei or any of them have the ability to say no to the regime, right? If they come to them and say, we want whatever the information is that they have as a result of doing business in the West, they will provide that information, right? And then they do a variety of other smart things. They have a very strategic view on things. If you just look at take mining, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And you think about the way that one of the things that they do, look, let's pick a good one. Phosphate. You can't have large scale agriculture without phosphate. And I know people are always like, who wants big farms anyway? Well, of course you want big farms because you want to feed the world, right? Because that's also important. So without phosphate, you can't make fertilizer, and so it's an important thing. It should be a critical mineral here in the U.S. It's not. And then the main phosphate producers, basically, China, Russia, Morocco. Now, China, in addition to working very hard to push their own phosphate industry, they look at and they've realized in the U.S. they can do certain things. They can, through cutouts, through not going in there and saying we're the Chinese government, but working through environmental groups, working through local or community organizations, working with city councils or town councils. They can influence local and state policies against mining, right? And so in a place like Florida, where, the phosphate business, it's pretty much, if we're not making phosphate, we've got to rely on China, Russia, and Morocco for this. So they go in and they'll influence, using cutouts, using, these various, and then eventually it looks like you've got some community grassroots organization saying, we don't want phosphate mining in our, our county. Yeah. And so the Chinese have been very smart in understanding if we push that, right, we can have a really serious impact on the U.S.'s ability to engage in business that we are definitely engaging in. And
sure.
It's the same with other critical elements, right? And we talk about electric batteries, right? Because we all want that green future. And somehow we're going to get away from fossil fuels. And
look at Canada and look at Alberta and look at the conversation coming from the CCP right through the Canadian government about we need to be green by 2030, or we're going to turn, we're going to have what, Mike, we're not going to make any more fossil fuel vehicles. Yeah, because that's the reality. Like, are you delusional? Are you fucking delusional, Canada?
Yeah. Well, and meanwhile, China's opening, 2 new coal plants a week. And, it's just, and also if anybody saw what a lithium mine looks like, a cobalt mine, and how damaging that is to the earth,
And the
they
people
might
that
think
work
twice
there.
about, just doing all these. I guess again, you may not like it, but the Canadians, the U.S., they tend to do mining in a much more environmentally friendly. It's ugly, but it's more environmentally friendly than what you're going to get elsewhere. Certainly run by some Chinese, state-sponsored mining company in Africa.
You mean
So
we're not going to put babies on our backs and go bare feet?
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just, because that's getting back to nature. But if you can put that baby to work, why wouldn't you?
Fucking Christ,
Um,
Mike. Oh my
yeah,
God.
you can't
Oh,
really, you can't mine much. That's the only problem. You gotta, it takes about 100 babies to do one man's work. So it's a big operation.
you're so living up to everything I hoped this would be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Okay.
sorry about that. I
No, don't
apologize.
ever be. No, I'm right here for it. But I ask this in general sincerity because I am in a country where we are seeing very similarly to other countries like China, Russia, North Korea. We are seeing things happen with the CRTC. We are seeing things like Bill C-11. We are
Mhm.
seeing new hate bills be put in. If I call somebody their actual birth name instead of they and them, I can be charged with a hate crime and held in for life in prison, Michael. So why is it that we are allowing this? Have we just poisoned the well? Is it that Trudeau is truly captured? Because I have a hard time believing that CSIS is fully captured when they dropped that document that just absolutely blew apart what was happening in Canada. And yet nobody said boo. It was totally, no, it's just delusional. That's not reality. Most people don't know what CSIS is unless they show up at your door. And they don't really, and they do it kindly. Like, let me side tangent, Mike. Have you seen the video of CSIS in black masks showing up at the Canadian's door who said that he wants to see Trudeau hanged? Have you seen that interaction?
No, I have not
Okay.
seen that.
Let me just
Wow.
give you a quick overview of how hilarious this was and gives you an illustration of Canada. CSIS comes to the door and they go, and he films it. And this is, I'm going to try to do the Canadian accent that I've so desperately lost. And it looks like this. And it goes, how can I help you guys? And they go, well, bud, we've been looking on Twitter and been seeing that you're calling for the prime minister to be hanged. And he goes, yep, I sure have there, bud. And they go, well, we're from CSIS and we're here to let you know that we need you to tone it down. And he goes, well, I'm not going to, bud. So you're going to have to show up at my door. Well, I guess, sir, we're just going to be here a lot. And he goes, well, my wife's Tammy. She makes great coffee. If you want to come in and have a conversation with us, you're more than welcome to there. And the whole point of that is when CSIS starts showing up at your door, do not tell me that is any different than the CCP showing up at the people's individual homes. The only difference is they're not dragging you out by your throat and taking you to a gulag that doesn't exist in a concentration camp that apparently doesn't actively happen, which we know they do. So my point in saying that is there is behaviors happening that CSIS has reported and yet still been
Yeah,
weaponized. And so I'm
yeah.
trying to understand, what is it? What is happening here? Why is it that laws and rules are being put in place and supposed to be one of the freest countries in the world, and yet nobody is screaming at the top of their lungs except for the handful of few people, including Peterson and the others, going down to America talking on large platforms because none of our content gets shared anymore due to the Iron Curtain that now exists in this country?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think what's happening is a small, extremely vocal minority has bullied most people into just silence. It's certainly the case in the U.S. It's just not, and you can see it with corporate behavior in terms of the things that they do. You can see it in terms of how people interact. There's just there's this sense of you know what, I'm just trying to put food on the table, I'm trying to take care of my family.
Ah.
I don't want the trouble, I don't want the problem, right? And so this vocal minority of people who enjoy this power grab, they're able to push whatever agenda they want because most people are just trying to get by, right? And so they don't want to be shut down, and they see that that's probably what will be happening if they push back. So it's easier not to push back for most people, right?
Is that not like the definition of a communist state here, Mike, where
Well,
that
sure, yeah, that's a problem, is because everybody just eventually goes along to get along, and the next thing you think to yourself, well, how'd that happen? Well, look, I mean, Portland, Oregon's a good example, right? They're
yes.
now starting to push back against this, free drugs and drug paraphernalia for everybody because the city turned to shit. But for a while they were like, yeah, this is the way to go. We don't want to punish anybody. Well, yeah, you want to have justice, and you want to have fairness in your justice system and everything, but there should be consequences for bad behavior. And,
Right.
there should be, and the consequence in this case, when there wasn't consequence of bad behavior, was you turned your city, what used to be beautiful, into this shithole. And now the very progressive, residents are starting to push back and say, yeah, maybe we actually do need consequences for criminal behavior. How about that as an idea? So I think you have to, it's like an alcoholic. I think they say you have to hit rock bottom, the very bottom, not just part of the bottom, but you have to hit the very bottom before you start changing your mind. And I think,
though.
yeah, we're starting to see that a little bit here, though. I think we're starting to see it in some ways where people are thinking, yeah, now, yeah. So we'll see. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic.
No, I like the optimism. Look, most of the time you look at these situations involving the CCP, and I'm not saying the Chinese. That's why I'm saying the CCP, because I believe the Chinese people here are some of what I see in Vancouver, at least during the protest. I'm sure you were consciously aware of the trucker protests going on up here.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of talking about that because there are a lot of Canadians, and I come from truck drivers. So I'm very proud that these people stood up and were able to do so. But you also do see the Chinese dissidents that came from China standing there with masks going, you guys need to wake the fuck up, because you don't quite understand what's happening right now under your face, under this guise of DEI and supporting others and allowing whatever we want to happen in this country. I'm genuinely concerned. And I know the people who have left China, who have come here, are also really concerned about it. That being said, I do appreciate the optimism, because if somebody doesn't give me some optimism in this country, I don't know how much more I can take.
Exactly right. Yeah, you think now, then what? Yeah, you gotta have some feeling, and I think it's I think Canada is the same. I think pretty resilient nations, and you get this upheaval, and you get a cycle of kind of moronic and stupid ideas, and whether it's defund the police. And again, I think people are coming back around from that idea, because why? And when you take police off the streets, or you stop funding them and you stop training them, they wanted better policing. Well, you know how you get better policing is you spend more money on the training, so the training is better and more consistent. And these dipshits, said, no, we got to get rid of police and just have social community workers. Well, good luck having a social community worker rock up on a violent domestic situation. And the next thing you know, everybody's getting capped, and you think, wait, what about him? Anyway, it's so you get these cycles where you get these stupid ideas, and you get this small group of people who shout louder than anyone else in the room, and everybody else gets tired of being yelled at, and for a while they just acquiesce, and then eventually things get so bad that even the idiots think, yeah, maybe we got to change that. I mean, we got a lot of people moving out of California. Now, the problem is a lot of them move out of California because the place, at least some of the urban centers, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco for sure, got shitty. So they move out, they come to a place like Idaho. Now, the problem is a lot of them, they're not smart enough to understand that they left a place because they were all voting in a certain way. And now they come here and they want to vote the same way.
Right.
It's like a swarm of locusts coming across the country, fucking up every city. So I think we have to hope that they get a little smarter.
I've heard that too. Every time I go, like I'm going down to Texas again next week. And I've heard that every time I go into these states, I go to Texas, I go to these places, and they're just fucking everywhere. They're ruining everything.
They're everywhere. Yeah,
Can you just shift the perspective? But speaking of that and stupid ideas and really ignorant perspectives, how many planes do you think we need to see fall out of the sky before we decide that maybe having DEI in the air industry is probably not a good idea?
Yeah, that's a surprise. United kind of led the way on that one. The head of United Airlines didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with going all in on that idea. Now, I think, once again, if he hadn't been so self-righteous and he'd gone and sat down with his marketing team and said, well, how should I present this? This is my idea. This is what I believe. Okay. how should I present it? Then maybe a smarter communications group and marketing team would have said, okay, here's how we need to package up your desire to say this, right? But
Right.
they don't do that. They all want to get out there and they all want to wave the banner of self-righteousness and
Mm-hmm.
show, how good they are. And they're just, I don't know where, I don't know where that part of it goes, but I don't, I think like one of my brothers was a senior pilot at one of the major airlines, and he watched kind of the way that it went with training, and I think they'll hold the line because it's one of those public safety issues that they can't really afford to get sideways with. It's one thing to say you're going to put a DEI component in there and you're really going to live by it and you're not going to focus necessarily on competency. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think the airline industry is quite that stupid. So I think they'll back off to some degree. But yeah, how about we just all get back to, the most competent person gets the job. But then what happens is the vocal minority screams and goes, well, that's racist, or that's prejudice, or you can't do that. You can't say the most competent person should get the job. And then you think, well, that sounds pretty racist if you're automatically saying that, you're disqualifying certain candidates. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that candidate, the most competent person, could be anybody from out there, right? So, but just give me the most competent person, and I don't care what they look like or what they believe. But for everybody wants to be self-righteous. It's a very powerful motivation.
But forgive me if I'm wrong here. I'm pretty sure a lot of pilots, there's protocols, medications you can't be on, things you can't be on. But I'm check me if I'm wrong here, but last time I checked, this DEI world of ours that we're swimming in and acting as if it's a completely acceptable thing for them to be flying airplanes often involves heavy medications, psychological disorders, and things that you cannot be taking as a pilot.
Yeah. That's why I think that the drug testing, the psychological testing that goes on, I don't see them. I don't see them adjusting that.
Okay.
Right. I can see it happening in a lot of sectors, but I'm pretty sure, based on what I know about the airline industry, that they're going to hold the line, no matter what the United Airlines CEO says or thinks. Because there's no quicker way to tank an airline than to lose a plane or two, or two. So yeah, hopefully, knock on wood, that's not going to be the case. But it's a component everywhere. Look, UNRWA, or not UNRWA, the United Nations, they're contracting. Everything that they do at the UN has a component now that you have to meet that's DEI based, right? And that includes mine clearing. And, I talked about a story the other day that, where, they put out a proposal for mine clearing that talked about, how are you going to meet the DEI requirements to ensure that it's an inclusive program. And I'm thinking, that mine, that unexploded ordnance doesn't give a shit what you look like, doesn't give a shit what you think or how you identify yourself. It's going to fuck you up with equally. Right?
Hi, Mr. Mine. My name is she, her, and I'm going to be here to, diffuse you today. This is a safe space. I want you to know that when I prod you, it's from love and only from a safe spot. I don't want you to feel triggered in any way. So please don't explode in my face. Boom.
Hopefully don't feel triggered.
What are we doing here?
I don't know, but it's an example of just how bizarre and far it can go. But that's the UN, and that's any government organization, that's any nonprofit, that's the World Bank. Everything's got now this tick the box because there's a cottage industry, right? There's people making money. They get these jobs so that they can monitor the DEI compliance and berate other people to tell them how wrong they are and how they they built their careers on white privilege or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah.
So there's an industry that makes money off of this. And you could argue that it's a pack of grifters who see, that there's an opportunity here for them.
1,000%.
Yeah. So I don't
know. People don't have to like it. Like they don't
maybe
have to like
I'm not being sensitive enough. I don't know. Hey, you know what I do have to do? You know what? And I hate to do this. But I'm gonna have to leave so that I can go record the afternoon bulletin for the President's Daily Brief.
Okay, I'm gonna let you leave, but only on one stipulation. You're like Kelsey. I'll just shut the screen off. I don't really care. Here's the stipulation. I have a lot of questions. I need you to come back on. I'd like you to come in person because we did not get into Ramadan that is about to kick off in a few days. And that's going to massively affect what happens in Israel with Hamas and what's
Oh,
being
God,
called
yeah.
for. And I
Absolutely.
think that there is a lot of conversations around the Sudan, the waterways, the Afghan pullout, Hamas, Israel, Trump, how he just got allowed to stay on the ballot. Listen, Mike,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we
I
got
know
stuff.
there's a lot
but
of shit there. Well, I would love to come up to Vancouver
Anytime.
and hang out. Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
great.
well, I'll shoot you a message after this, my friend. But anyway, Mike, not that you need it, but where the hell can people listen to the Presidential Daily Brief? How can they support you? How can they hire you at Portman Square Group for the leading security intelligence?
Well, hopefully they don't have problems where they need to hire a Portman Square Group. It's an intelligence and strategic, services or risk mitigation security services firm. But I appreciate you mentioning that. It's a great company. We've been very fortunate hiring some wonderful people. But the President's Daily Brief, hey, it's available. Morning edition, the afternoon bulletin on any podcast platform you've got, Spotify, Amazon, all the usual, Apple. So we're out there, tune in. We'd love to have you sign on for sure. And we'll be putting out soon. Here's a little bit of breaking news: the premium subscribers opportunity, so you don't have to listen to those pesky ads.
That's all right. I'm here for it, Mike. I cannot thank you enough for your time. And I know my listeners are going to be stoked beyond all get out, but I am looking forward to having you back up here. We'll schedule that afterwards. You stick with me. Everyone else, we'll see y'all next week.